Yeah, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have the privilege of showcasing this beautiful project by matMADNESS. And he couldn't have picked a more fitting name, because this is madness. These skin and eye shaders that were custom made by Mad himself come shipped to you in his open source project Human Shaders under an MIT license, meaning you're allowed to copy, remix and resell these shaders in your game. As soon as Matt posted the project on Reddit, I shot him a message asking if I can cover it in a video, and he gave me permission, so here we are. We're gonna dive into this project, see what makes it tick, and hopefully learn a bunch. So let's get into it. So, here we are in the project. I'll leave a link to the GitHub repository in the description. I'll also leave a link to the itch.io page, which has a built version of this demo, so you can play around with it without having to import it into the editor. I'll also leave all Matt's socials down below. Go shower him with love. This man deserves it. 10 out of 10. Man of the people, releasing this under an MIT license. So let's jump into the demo. As you can see, Matt has set up a couple of lighting settings, a couple of sliders and settings for the material, so we can really see what's going on here. With the right mouse button you can rotate the lights, with the left mouse button you can rotate the model, and with the middle mouse you can drag it around. Scrolling zooms you in and zooms you out. And the first thing I notice here is this translucency on the ear. This is light entering the ear from the back, shining on the blood vessels within the ear and coming out as red light. You can see here under the translucency setting, it goes on and off. Later we'll look into how he only did this on the ear and not on the other parts of the model. What I also see happening here is a lot of subsurface scattering. This is the effect where light enters the skin, scatters under the surface and comes back out. And this gives this almost blurry effect to the texture, because all the light is being scattered out, making it a little bit more blurry and a little bit more realistic in my opinion. You can see if we turn down the subsurface scattering, that contrast of the texture really comes out and it looks more like a solid material. Where here, it feels more like flesh. This is how flesh works. What I also like to highlight here is the detail texture on the skin. So the whole skin has this normal map, creating these bumps and ridges in detail, but then there's a second layer. You can see these super microscopic skin details, very impressive. And I believe this is done with overlaying a second normal map over the original normal map in a way more tiled, smaller vector, which allows for these super minute details. Very impressive. There's also an animation built into the demo here. You can see these facial expressions, movement of the head, and this isn't just done by a skeletal rig. There's also blend shapes in use here, and I'll explain what those are and how to use them later. And the last thing of note here, which is in my opinion the most beautiful thing here, are these eye shaders. The way the light enters these eyes makes them glow, and the way the texture warps, you see that? Texture warps as you look at the eye from different angles. So realistic, so impressive. We'll also have a look at this. As for performance, I was pleasantly surprised by the project. Here's it running on my phone. Not that that proves a lot, phones are very powerful these days. Yeah, probably having a scene full of these shaders is gonna bunk down the performance a little bit, but for what it is now, it's super impressive performance-wise. So let's look at the code. When I requested permission to cover this project from Matt, he did warn me that the project was a little bit messy, and it is a little bit. We'll have to dive into some notes to find the things that we're looking for. And we're gonna cover his techniques on a bit of a general standpoint, because we're not gonna go line by line through his giant shaders. These shaders are 300 lines and 200 lines respectively, and cover some very difficult techniques that would just take too long to explain. So I'll go over the effects as they are, what they do and how they work, but I'm not gonna go line by line through his shaders. So let's look at the skin. His skin is set here in the head visuals node. He created this little manager for the material so he can couple them with that UI so the sliders connect nicely to the shader. And here in the material we can find his shader with all these shader attributes, which we'll go through. Albedo is just the base texture of the model. You can see if we remove it, we lose the skin. Roughness, there isn't actually a roughness texture, which is surprising to me, so the whole head has the same roughness no matter where you look at it. You can see this in the hair, where it looks like skin. Specular is also covered here, which we'll leave as is. Metallicness, there's also no metallic texture, and there's no metallicness applied to this model because it's not metal, it's flesh. Then we'll get into the normal map. So there is this giant overlaying normal map for the whole face, as you can see here. If we bump it up, you can see this is a lot bigger detail than we see on the skin. So as we expected, there is a micro detail layer, and you can see there's a scale factor, and this will no doubt control the size of those skin particles. You can see when I set it really big, you can see the map. It's set to 50 by him, which will leave it. And as you can see, it is this tiled normal map that is laid over the whole model, creating these super microscopic details. Very cool. He even included the ability to control the ambient occlusion of the micro detail separately from the other ambient occlusion, which is a super nice detail. The ambient occlusion itself is here. You can see we only have some around the ears, around the mouth, the nose and the eyes. As you can see, there's no real shadows baked into the ambient occlusion map here, which is what we like to see. And then we have the settings for subsurface scattering. Again, that light scattering under the surface of the skin, creating this more fleshy look. There's a bunch of settings here. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm an expert on a subsurface scattering shader. That's extremely difficult and I'm not familiar with this game. But the amount of control implemented within the shader here for subsurface scattering is without a doubt very impressive. We even have a slider baked in to return some of that skin detail that is lost during surface scattering. So here you can see we can turn that grittiness down. This could be nice for a more rougher look. Then another thing we wondered about was that translucency on the ears and how it was only locally done here. And it's instantly explained here in this texture. Here we have this translucency map which decides which part of the model are translucent, and we can see only those ears, specifically these parts of the ear shells being highlighted here, allowing for the translucency. And finally we have the UV scales and offsets. Of course these are not to be tweaked. I was really expecting him to use the UV2 scale for the micro details, but that seems to be a completely separate part. And before we jump into the eye shaders, I'd like to explain the animation. So there is a skeletal animation, you can see right here, a couple of bones for the neck and the head and the eyes, but most of it is done by blend shapes. You can see all these blend shapes here, and if we go into the head model, there's also a little tab for blend shapes, and as you can see, we can warp the model using these blend shapes. And this is actually a super useful and easy technique that I don't see a lot of people use, so I quickly wanted to explain it. If you have your model in Blender, let's just use a UV sphere for this. You can go into the data tab here on the right, and there's shape keys. We'll add the base shape, which is just this normal shape. And if we add another shape and then go into edit mode, we can warp the model. And then when we exit edit mode, you can see it jumps back. And when we tweak that key, you can blend in between the two shapes. And these shapes can even overlap each other. So if you create another key, and we create another deformity. If we now apply that second key and then also the third one, you can see they merge together. Super useful for creating organic animations and just a powerful tool to have in your pocket, so I quickly wanted to explain that. When this model is exported to Godot, those shape keys will appear here in the blend shapes, which you can animate in the animation player, which has been done here. And finally, let's have a look at those eyes. I'll hide the head and create these creepy floating eyes so we can have a better look at them. First thing I notice is they're actually realistically shaped. Your eyes are not completely round. The lens on top creates this bulge, which is modeled in here. Then let's drop into the eye and let's find that shader. Here it is. We can see in the shader the eyeball and the irises are being separated, which is to be expected. The quality of the texture in the irises is super high, and we cannot have that quality over the whole eyeball, obviously. And here we have the texture for the eyeballs, and then here for the iris. Super nice high-res texture. So how is this magical warping of the iris being achieved? Well, I've dug through the code a little bit and looked at the settings, and I finally figured it out. It's actually just a height map, which is super clever. You can see if we disable the height map here by just setting this height map flip to 0 and 0, you can see the texture is just applied to the model on the surface, and we lose that warping and the depth of the iris. But as soon as we start turning this up, you can see that height map being applied, and the iris falls deeper. It's almost like a parallaxing effect. There's also a bunch of settings here for the scale of the iris on the eye. which is looking extremely wild. For the specular, which you always would want to have quite high for eyes, and the roughness, you can create rough eyes if you like. And obviously the eyeball and the iris have a normal texture. Those create some extra detail when looking at it from different angles. And finally, that warmth, that glow, is created through the same technique as on the skin, through subsurface scattering. You can see if we disable this, the eyes lose their soul a little bit. That warmth, that glow is gone. And there you can see again that light coming into the iris and really glowing up these eyes. Very beautiful. And that will do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'd like to run a little test on the performance of this project on different hardware. If you guys have some spare time, could you download the project on GitHub, open it in Godot 4.5, enable FPS like this, and drop your specs and FPS down in the comments. I'd love to know how it performs. Anyways, thanks for watching. Go shower Matt with love. Amazing job on the project. Congratulations, man. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.